Professor Koszewska, good morning, everybody. Professor Koszewska, thank you for nice introduction. I would like to say that Professor Koszewska, as well as Mr. Aremza, are the product of our department. Professor Koszewska made habilitation at our department, and Mr. Aremza make engineering in my supervisor. So it's, I think, growing cooperation. Today, I would like to present some information about the standards for sustainable procurement. First, I will tell about why we need standards for sustainable procurements. Next, what is the background of the standards? The number of the standards 20,040. I will use 204 because it saves me time. Next, I will describe a little bit contents of the standards, and there are 4 main clauses in this standards, from 4 to 7, and I will pick up some main idea from this standards, and at the end we have standards. They are for some recent improvement. So what is there's a European Parliament directives devoted to sustainable procurements. In this standards, they refer to standards as the technical scope information in the procurement process. Reference to the standards is possible in the technical specification on the period of preparation documents for the procurement, as well as for the identification of suppliers, their quality and quantity, as well as allow to prepare all the documents. But we can use standards only in the stage of preparation, where the tender is already done. It's not possible to add additional standards. Usually people add ISO 9000, sometimes ISO 40001, but now other standards become more important, like, for example, ISO 26000, devoted to sustainable corporate social responsibility. And what is a standard? Let me a little bit tell. I know you are from technical university, you are using standards, but the standard is a document which is intended to be used as a rule, guideline, or just definition in the area of preparation, some products, also services, just to obtain the goals which we want to reach. Standards are used for a century. When the first industrial revolution started, they start to produce new products, not only the mobile, but other ones. So it was necessary to establish the rules just to follow in order to get products which will fulfill the requirements. And standards were established first in Britain, also French, and they were the first countries which established standards. Next, they moved to the States. The purpose of standardization is primarily to ensure the product quality, reduce the production costs, as well as establish the understanding what is a product. And standards enables also buyers and sellers of goods and services to agree on some characteristic of the supply which will be conducted during the procurement process, for example. Also, they cover the testing procedure as well as environmental impact. We have 3 levels of standards. First are international standards which are developed usually by the international standard organization, which we know as ISO. Next, we have some standards which are elaborated by the Electrochemical Commission, and they have abbreviation IEC. Also, a lot of standards developed by the Telecommunication Union, ETU. Also, on the level of European Union, we have several standards. One of the most important is the European Community Standardization, CN, also SENDEC, which are to the electrochemical area, as well as for the telecommunication, ATC. Each country established its own standards, and these national standards should be related with the ISO, but in some area of industry, national standards are also working. So we have standards. Standards can be referenced to the most stage of the procurement process in the preliminary market consultation, and we can establish award criteria based on the standards. Next, in the draft of the contract, we can make a precise technical specification, and also in the contract notice, we can put which standards we will respect during the proceeding. Next, when we already established the tender, we can only on this stage apply standards. In the post-contracting phase, we are not allowed to add additional standards, because those who apply, they know already which standard will be applied, so it will not be possible to add additional one. What is the background of the standards? The standard is based on the British standards, which is already more than 10 years in okay. Each organization can apply the standards in the procurement process, because it's really important to follow the rules. And in order to support organization with such a goal, ISO organization established a new standard, which was published 5 years ago with the number 20,400. And this standards follow the British standards 8903, which was published already in 2010. It was devoted to the sustainable public procurements, and the basic idea, however, came from the other standards, namely terminology came from ISO 26000, which is devoted to the corporate social responsibility. All the terminology which was used in this standard is applied also to the 204. Another, which was important, the standards provide guidelines for public procurements for all organizations, regardless the activity size and place. And what is important, it complements with ISO 26000, and both of them are important in this process. The idea of this standards is to allow stakeholders implement this procurement in the idea based on the technical standards to make proper decision, as well as correctly choose the suppliers of the goods, services. And this is also important to understand the meaning of the sustainable procurements, especially in the area of sustainable development. In the introduction to the official text, ISO claimed that sustainable procurement represents an opportunity to provide more value to organization by improving productivity, assessing the value of performance, enabling communication between stakeholders, producers, suppliers, and what is important, encouraging innovation. One point is really devoted to the innovation. Another, here is the scope of the standards. It obeys 7 main themes. As usually at the beginning are the scope, normative references, terms and definition. And for other clauses, which I will follow one by one, trying to give you some information. This scheme came from the standards, and of course from the as well, not possible to read it, but don't worry, I will tell about some of them a little bit more. So, what is the scope of the standards? This document provides guidance organization independent, as I told, of the size, activity, as well as other place, private or public, on integrated sustainable aspect to the procurement process, as described in the ISO 26000. It is intended to stakeholders which are involved in the process to make proper decision. And what is important, this standard is a guidance standard. It's not the requirement standards. What does it mean? You can make evaluation of your company if it's fulfilled standards for the public procurement, but you cannot get certification. But because some company offer, we will certify your company on ISO 205. It's no way. So terms and definition. This standard contain more than 40 definition. I will not follow, of course, each of them, but they start from the circular economy, because today we have also the environmental labeling. There's such a definition also, life cycle, ethical behavior, due diligence. For us, it's important procurements. They have 2 definitions of procurements, just the procurements and sustainable procurements. They define the point 318, procurement as an activity of acquiring goods, services, and suppliers. They have also 2 notes explaining some idea from this definition. But for us, it's important that the process consider whole life cycle from the identification of the needs through the realization for the final disposal. And this is important, I will tell later, because when we order some goods, sometimes we forget what will happen at the end of the process to be clean after this process. And the next, what is important, this process also define specification and how to select suppliers. And what is more interesting for us, sustainable procurements. Procurements that has more positive influence on the environment, social and economic aspects, which are followed by the entire life cycle. So we have here defined also what are the sustainability aspects, services, supply chain, and other. Also, here we have how to define goals of sustainable development. We know that United Nations defined 17 goals. They follow here also this rules. And what is the difference between normal procurements and sustainable procurements? You already know, but I will tell that according to the standards, sustainable procurements go beyond the organization to determine all of these practices of procurement will affect environmental, social, and economic along the procurement cycle. And why sustainable purchasing is important? Because it protects the company to the losing of the reputation, as well as allowing avoid some bad situation during the realization. Sustainable purchasing is about the products and services, which we sometimes call green products or green purchasing. And green purchasing helps to reduce greenhouse gases emission, cut solid waste, conserve energy. Anna will tell about the electricity mix in public procurement. This is also here in this standard declared. Another thing which is what cover these standards in several clauses. I will tell a little bit about these standards from clause 4 to clause 7. Of course, as you can see, the standards which more than 60 pages, and don't worry, I will not tell about each definition and clauses, but I try to explain you some main idea. Clause 4 provides a view of sustainable procurement. It describes principle and core subject of sustainable procurements. Also, how organization can organize this process. Important consideration is given to the managing risk, including opportunities. Also, how to address sustainability aspects, setting priorities. Also, how to avoid, for example, complicity in the procurement process. This section belongs to the fundamentals of the public procurements, cover, as I told, principles of sustainable development, as well relation with ISO 26000. It emphasizes the need for organization to understand what drivers can procure sustainable procurements, as well what priorities would be taken in the consideration. Here also they use the special guidance of United Nations for the guiding human rights in business, as well as I told, United Nations sustainable standards. In some paper you can find that sustainable procurements fulfill requirements of 6 of the goal. And to the contents, this clause is targeted to all people participation in the procurement process. The first contain concept, principles, also the core subject, drivers, and consideration for sustainable procurement. And the clause 4.2, the principle, as you can see, there is more than 10 of them, but at the beginning they define who is accountable. We will hear today about the life cycle, costing, and all of them are defined in this point. Clause 4.3, core subject of social responsibility. And here we have how to choose the human rights, labor practices, environment, operative practices, and community involvement and development in the procurement process. Next clauses, drivers, 15. We start from consumers, but we have also the stakeholders, public policies, supply chain workers, very important drivers, also cost optimization, and at the end, organization ethics. These drivers give us idea who influence sustainable public procurement. The next clause, 4.5, the consideration which are devoted to the managing risk, setting priorities, exercising influence, also avoiding complexity and due diligence. This is important for the realization of the process. And next clause 5, provides guidance on sustainability consideration, how to integrate this working with procurement practices for the organization to ensure that the intention, direction, and key sustainability priorities which was established by the organization will be achieved. So it is intended to the top management to help them defining and realization of sustainable procurement policy and strategy. So this clause is called sometimes policy strategy, and it's set to adopt principles and fundamentals of the sustainable procurement to all the process which is going in the company or the other institution. Let's see what is in this clause. This is targeted to the upper management. Important that they have separate rules for the top management and also other people which are engaged in the public procurement. So we have here committing to sustainable procurement, why top management will enter this process, clarifying accountability, also setting procurement policy and managing implementation. When we are going to the first point, committing sustainable procurement, it's interesting. This is not from the standards, but there is a company, EcoWedis, which made so-called sustainable procurement barometer, and they established that more than 40% of people which are engaged in the sustainable procurement, they produce them due to the ethical reason. It's really important because usually we know that public procurements are based mainly on the price, but this is not so important for this people. Next came, of course, revenue growth. Company try to work with this procurement in the more sustainable way. Third one, protecting of the existing business. Buyers try to meet expectation of the suppliers and others in order to fulfill the requirements. And at the end, only 16% complying with the existing regulation. This means EU directive as well as the national laws. So here we see that purpose and ethical reasons are much more important for the people than the money, which they can save, for example, during the process. Point 5.2 is clarifying accountability. Who is engaged in this process? And we see here that we have top management, which is called accountable. They develop the sustainable procurement strategy in the organization and they lead this process. And on the lower level are the procurement management. Next, we have people who realize this process. They are responsible for the actual procurements. And at the end, we have staff which realize this program, which drives the program. So this is from the standards, and we can see how this public procurement, sustainable procurement process is going in the organization. Okay. In the clause 5.3, we have rules to higher level of company, how they can commit policy and strategy in the guidance of implementation of sustainable procurement. This is also important sometimes to explain the top management that they should try to introduce sustainable procurement, which is not easy. A few years ago, we realized that diploma thesis devoted to this subject, and it's really shown that it's not so easy to explain top management in different offices, that it's necessary to change, go through the normal procurement to the sustainable. And point 5.4, setting procurement policies. This is implementation of procurement in different sectors, in different part of organization. And one should know the criteria in terms of sustainability of the budget, local priorities, as well as upcoming contracts. Also, we have some other alternatives for the products or supplies which we can choose. 5.5, managing implementation. This clause provides necessary collaboration between different parts of department in the company. And next is clause 6, which describes the organizational condition for the implementation of sustainable procurements. Mean management technique which are needed to successfully implement this procurements, as well as how to ensure that such condition and practices will be realized in the company. Who can assist individuals working with procurements in order to get this idea, especially the sustainable consideration, because sometimes people say, oh, it's against the free market and so on. Next, this clause is devoted to the numbers. Officially, they call it organizing the procurement function toward sustainability. It covers the organization conditions which are required to deliver sustainable procurements, as well as covering few issues such as governance, leadership, priorities, developing people. We have to teach people how to provide this procurement. And also, if we can engage the suppliers with which we will cooperate. Okay. This clause is devoted to numbers, especially is targeted to the procurement managers. And they have 6 clauses, how to govern procurements, enabling people, stakeholders, principle of sustainable procurements, how to measure the results of sustainable procurements, as well what is really important for companies, how to establish a grievance mechanism in order to protect our business as well as rights of the people. So let's see what is a special impact from the clause 6. This clause allows governing a baseline inventory in the preparation of sustainable procurements at the stage of implementing. It may contain organizational arrangement, so it means which people and departments will be involved in this process. Also, what kind of inventory we have to make in order to collect data on quality of the service and products we want to buy, we want to purchase, and also what price will be correct for us. Also, environmental and social criteria for this process. Enabling people who exactly implement sustainable procurement in the company. It may be not only procurement department, but also sustainability, finance, special departments which are interesting. For example, cleaning department, which will show us what kind of cleaning chemicals they want, but also the IT, because IT now is very important in the procurement process in order to make, for example, market searching. They establish a working group to cooperate and find the idea of the most effective way to achieve the success in the implementation of this procurement. And clause 6.3, they define identifying and engaging stakeholders. When we are going to start procurements, we have to make good market intelligence to find potential suppliers, potential products, the best products which fulfill our expectation, and also important rules to implement sustainable procurement. We have to be open in the public discussion with suppliers to explain them that we really need green products, green services, or sustainable products, which are defined by different organizations. And the point 6.4, priorities for public procurement. It's really important to avoid risk in the management of procurements. We will always be touched by this problem. Category approach, supplier approach, and the issue approach. This point is on this point main idea. When we already established public procurements, we want to measure how they are effective, how we can report our results and our good practice and good achievements will be the benchmarking for other institutions or other companies. So we, at the beginning, have to determine the progress in achieving the goals of and monitor the system. Also, combine procurements with other indicators. There are several of them. Some of them are based on the Sustainable Development Goals established by the United Nations, but also Professor Kulczycka claims that sustainable procurements can be the one of the indicators of the sustainability or circular economy in given countries. Grievance mechanism. A grievance mechanism is a formal, legal or unlawful process that can be used by individual workers, communities, consumers, also workers, communities, consumer organization, other civil society that are adversely affected by business activities and operation. Grievance mechanism does not replace the possibility to go to the justice. So it's really important for company to avoid right violation, which company may be responsible, and provide remedy for the people who are affected by our activity. The grievance mechanism also allows stakeholders to raise grievance related to our company supply sustainable process, and you know that it's really very frequently happen in our country that during the procurement process there is a lot of such cases. Last one, clause 7, address the procurement process, which is devoted to the individuals who are responsible for the actual procurements, as well, which describe how sustainability is integrated into existing procurement process. Each company is organizing procurement process, but we have to switch to the sustainable process. And procurement process, which is described in this clause, is a typical process, but some relation to the sustainable development idea and rules, which are really based on the supply chain. And as I told, this point is targeted to the procurement individuals. So we have a point devoted to planning, integrated sustainability requirements to the specification and the process, selecting suppliers, how to manage the contract, and how to review the contract during the realization and post at the final stage. So this scheme shows us how the process of sustainable procurements go in the company. We start with planning. Next, we have integrated sustainability requirements to the specification, selecting suppliers, managing contracts, and the last one, review the contract. And the clause devoted to planning, they establish the key sustainable procurement elements. As you can see from this scheme, we start from assessing the risk, analyzing the cost, analyzing the organization needs, and analyzing the market. This together made the complementing the source strategy. As we have today the lecture by Anna about the cost and the clause 723, we had to analyze the cost. We have also another scheme for this process. There is also some other scheme related to the market, but it's typical product life cycle, which we know from the marketing or other processes. 7.3, integrated sustainability requirements into specification. We have to define sustainable procurement criteria. This is very important because if we establish criteria, next suppliers will follow this criteria, and we cannot change it. Next, we have to define the types of requirements. That can be physical properties, functional properties, as well as other things which are important for the criteria. We can apply for three type of choosing the criteria. First, applying minimum or optional requirements. This is sometimes realized by the people. Next, we can find information to establish the requirements. And second one, we have to evaluate which sustainability requirements are already met. And in this clause, we have a criteria which, for example, can be made established on the ISO standards. Usually, as I told at the beginning, people put to the criteria fulfillment of the requirements of ISO 9000 because mostly the company are already certified for this process. But this is just only the organization process, not the full sustainable process. So this standards can be applied. Also, the European Commission has a criteria for the sustainable products, and these products are it's 18 years now. This cap for the different sustainable products, they are also implemented by the national body. And as a third lecture, there will be about the eco labels. They can also be valuable criteria information for the developing criteria. And Joanna will tell you more, but we have Ecolabel, global labeling network, or Green Guard, which are the examples of eco-labeling. Another important point for the companies is selecting suppliers. We have to assess the capacity of the suppliers. Next, make pre-qualification. And also make a review in order to find proper people, proper suppliers. Here we have three possibilities regarding superior standards and performance. Next, qualitative judgment, or just fit for purpose assessment. If this suppliers fit our expectation. But usually people use the method of cost calculation. And this is, in my opinion, not the best way to choose the supplier. On the stage of managing of the contract, we have also several issues which should be fulfilled, not only the implementing the contract and manage performance, but sometimes when we have a relation with the suppliers, we can find some important new innovation. But for me, this important point, managing disposal and end of life. And of course, in many contracts, this point is missing. And now in Poland, and not only in Poland, a lot of people put the photovoltaics, and in the contract there is no point who will take care on these panels when they become useless, find his useful life, or just become destroyed. And this will be the serious problem for the people who, as on the roof or some vicinities, because I ask many waste company in my city in Poznań, they say we are not dealing with such a waste. So this should be a point in the procurement contracts, the tender contracts, to avoid the problems at the end of the process. The waste should be allowed to be recycled or some other way, not go to the landfill. And at the end, we have a reviewing and learning from the contract. Buying company should conduct regular review of the contract during the realization, but also at the end of the contract, to ensure that learning lessons from this realization will allow us for continual improvements as well as achieve better result of sustainable performance. This contracts obey details about the risk, including opportunities to improve, for example, also details about the achievement of sustainability objectives and targets during the contract, overview of sustainability performance, analysis of successful criteria, and what lesson for the future we can have from this process. Okay, we have also 3 annexes to the standards, all informative. The first one is show how the ISO 26000 sustainable process is related to the procurement. This standard is described in Annex B, and this is important because companies must realize now the corporate social responsibilities, and this allows to also certification. And in the Annex 3, we have 2 examples of sustainable procurements, of the examples of electronic products and food products, so from different area. And why it's beneficial to implement ISO in practice. And of course, we know that this procurements are important when we want to meet the requirements of responsibility during the supply chain, identify legal, financial, ethical risks related to sustainability in supply chain, monitor sustainability performance of company suppliers, and provide some idea for improvement. Also, build value-added supply technologies. This standard is a guidance which can help organization during the procurement process to realize in the way which is positive not only for the company but also to the worker rights, legal, environmental obligation, economic equity through the full supply chain. And the last one, this company which I already mentioned, they make investigation. What are the main benefits from the sustainable procurements which are implemented based on the ISO 204 standards? And the first found that company in the better way can control the risk, especially when they establish the main priorities of the procurement department. Important to reduce the costs which are related to the sustainable procurements. Usually people claim that green products, sustainable products are more expensive than the normal one, and it's possibility to found that it's not the case. Next, fostering innovation and differentiation during the new product services. And this is beneficial for company because we can discover some new products or new services which will help us to manage company. Increase turnover, of course, in the aspect of social, environmental, and technical, as well as ethical requirements. Improvement indicators. Not only this one related to the fulfillment of sustainable development goals, but also the other which are described in the standards or in the directive. improve non-official rating. As you know, the states, they have Dow Jones Sustainability Index. There are also other ratings, and every huge company has a position on the they can obtain better Dow Jones Sustainability Index, and company can find talent which will help them to manage procurement in the future. So thank you, and I wish you good stay and good further conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We had such a proposition that the questions will be after the session after Anna. But I have a question for you. How many of you did already analyze this ISO standard or considered in your PhD in any way?
Our second.
In your second. Okay. Okay. Because going through the whole standard that is 60 pages, and you just gave this information in the one compact way, usually there will be a whole course on implementing ISO. So thank you very much, Professor, for giving us this in a not going through the whole 60 pages, but
I might say that some companies they have a courses which are 2-day courses on this standard. Just to explain all issue step by step.
Step by step. Yes. Okay. So now the second topic, as I said, by Professor Anna Lewandowska, which will be about the electricity, and we also didn't touch this. I think that nowadays becomes more and more important. The subject of electricity generally.